Hey folks, so today we're going to discuss right intention. What is it? So I'm Doug Smith. I'm study director at the Secular Buddhist Association. That's secularbuddhism.org. And if you're new to the channel and interested in helping to create a wiser and a kinder and a less stress-filled world, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll have talks like these out roughly once a week on Mondays. If you like that, consider subscribing. So right intention. Right intention is the second of the Eightfold Path, the second stage or step along the Eightfold Path. It's one that we might consider as coming from right view, so we begin with right view, and having that right view, we come to right intention. And there are traditionally three aspects to right intention. The first of these is the intention for renunciation. The second is intention for goodwill. And the third is the intention for harmlessness. And each of these intentions should be seen as counteracting a negative tendency that we may find within ourselves. The renunciation counters a kind of greed or desire that we have innately. Intention for goodwill counteracts our tendency for ill will, and our intention for harmlessness counteracts our, at times, intention of harming others. So to understand these intentions that we should have along the path, I think it's important to see their negatives, to understand their negatives. So the negative, again, of renunciation is this kind of greed or desire, this kind of a negative desire that we often have. In early Buddhist understanding, there's two aspects to this negative desire. One of them has to do with ethics, and one of them doesn't so much. We often have unethical desires. We have desires to steal at times. We have desires to kill other people. We may have desires to lie, and so on. These are desires that obviously have ethical components to them, and so to that extent, our renunciation, our intent to renounce, involves an intent to act ethically. But there are other kinds of desires that we have that aren't ethical specifically, but that involve what in the early Buddhist understanding is kind of a bondage to the world. That is to say, our desire for sensual enjoyment generally. So, for example, there's nothing ethically wrong with going out and enjoying a good meal, or buying fancy clothes, or going on a vacation to the tropics and sitting out under the sun, so on. There's nothing ethically wrong with that. But it is a way in Buddhist understanding of putting yourself into bondage, further bondage, with sensual pleasures. And to that extent is not really helpful along the path. Here there is, of course, an important distinction we should keep in mind between lay practice and monastic practice. For lay practice for the Buddha, this second aspect of right intention is really not operative quite as much. Certainly during his lifetime, he wasn't expecting lay people to renounce these kinds of things. In fact, he said that it was quite fine for lay people to enjoy their wealth as they like. And he understood that that would have involved spending that wealth on finery of various kinds. Nevertheless, for monastics, it certainly is very important, key really, to have the right intention of renunciation of all things, including renouncing these kinds of sensual pleasures. And to the extent that we, as secular practitioners, are trying to collapse this distinction between lay and monastic, we should also consider it within our own lives as well. The extent to which our pursuit of sensual pleasures is getting in the way of our practice. Now, secondly, ill will towards others. Clearly, we all know this is not helpful, it's not skillful. We all know that it shouldn't be acted out upon as much as we can, as much as we can avoid to act out upon it. We also know that it's no good to repress ill will, to pretend that it doesn't exist, to force it down. That only makes it worse. So our practice with ill will is one of the things that is ongoing. It has to be ongoing for all of us, I think. And of course, one of the major, most important practices that the Buddha has to counter ill will would be the practice of loving kindness, or metta meditation. This is a practice of selfless love in a way, a love that doesn't involve the object of that love having a relation to us of benefit. It's simply that we have friendliness towards all things simply in virtue of their being sentient beings. I've given a lecture in the past, a video on loving kindness meditation, which I'll put in a card up here so you can see that if you're interested in learning more about it. But basically we can say it's a kind of understanding that we're all looking to pursue the good in our own ways, that we may make mistakes. We all have our own blind spots. We're all ignorant in certain ways. We have our negative emotions. And if we understand this in others and see the others reflected in ourselves, we'll have goodwill towards them as well as to ourselves. And third is this aspect of harmlessness towards all beings. And again, we oftentimes feel a desire to harm other people or other things or the world in general. It is, in fact, a perfectly natural kind of human emotion. But I think we understand, at least conceptually, that emotion is not helpful to us, that it's not skillful, and in fact that it redounds upon ourselves, that eventually the harm that we do to others comes back to ourselves in one way or another. The antidote to this kind of harm is compassion for the suffering of other people and other beings, and understanding that their suffering is, in a sense, our own suffering. And understanding as well that we're all in the same boat, that everyone wants to be free of suffering, that nobody likes to suffer, that this is a universal kind of truth. And I think to the extent that we can come to see that, and to the extent that we can practice a kind of compassion meditation, we can in our own way overcome this kind of desire to harm. And we can replace it with the intention for harmlessness. So again, these are the three aspects of right intention. The intention for renunciation, the intention for goodwill, the intention for harmlessness. And insofar as we have those three intentions, we're well set up on the Eightfold Path, and the second of the parts of the Eightfold Path. And of course, we're all working our way towards setting these up, all parts of the path, slowly, bit by bit. So I hope that was helpful to you. If you're new to the channel, welcome. And I hope you'll consider subscribing. We're always glad to have you here. And thanks so much for being here, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.